war and for the world at large. All that and more. The most significant story of the day coming up on the Newstrack tonight.
Сегодня пополудня в 12
без боеприпасов, без мусора.
Найду! Герасима! Где боеприпасы?
A baffling 24-hour mutiny.
Центр! Найду!
Biggest challenge to Putin in 20 years. Has Putin's invincible image taken a hit? Are there real cracks in Putin's authority? What next for Vladimir Putin? Big focus on Newstrack.
We have a power-packed show lined up tonight. Top experts from Russia, from Ukraine, from New Delhi, looking at what's happening in the battlefield. This battle on endlessly, and questions were being asked about how long it could drag on for. Suddenly things are in a greater flux than they have been for the last 1 year. Here's a look at the headlines and Modi government hits back at former US President Barack Obama over his comments on minorities. Finance Minister Sitaraman says Obama dropped over 26,000 bombs on Muslims. A former US official also slams Obama. Gangster Goldie Brar's big confession to India today, says he will kill superstar Salman Khan, admits to masterminding the murder of singer Moosewala. Home Minister Amit Shah briefs Prime Minister Modi on the situation in Manipur. Briefing comes a day after the Manipur CM Biren Singh met with Shah. Delhi Discoms allowed to hike power tariffs. BJP accuses Kejriwal government of looting citizens. AAP blames the centre for the price rise. After semiconductor major Micron announces setting up of a plant in Gujarat's Sanand, Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav promises the first made-in-India chip by December 2024. It seemed as if the militia of Russian warlord Yevgeny Prigozhin were marching towards Moscow. They'd come to within 200 kilometers of the Russian capital, and then almost as suddenly as that insurrection began, it ended. Thanks to the help of the Belarusian president, the insurrection was called off. But nobody who tracks Russia and geopolitics thinks that the last word has been written on this apparent coup or this insurrection. The critical question, of course, is what happens from here? What is the extent to which Vladimir Putin's grasp over power in Russia has been eroded? Were there people in Moscow who were siding with Prigozhin as he began this insurrection? What could happen next? Remember, Vladimir Putin's control over Russia was considered uncontested before this. Suddenly, no one seems quite as certain. On this show, we look at what's happening in the battlefield, on the ground at this moment, and we try and ask a very sharp set of panelists about what could happen next. What does this mean for Russia, Ukraine? What does this mean for India and the rest of the world?
June 24, the world discovered that Russian mercenary Wagner group had taken control of Rostov-on-Don and was marching towards Moscow. The mutiny was led by the group's commander, Yevgeny Prigozhin. Putin came on Russian television and accused Prigozhin of treason.
those who organized and prepared this rebellion, those who put up weapons against their fellow comrades, they have betrayed Russia and they will be held accountable for that.
200 kilometers from Moscow, the armed uprising came to a dramatic end. Since then, an eerie calm has now fallen on Russia. The man who led the insurrection has gone quiet. The Russian president has also not been seen in public since his televised address on Saturday. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu, whose ouster was one of the chief demands of Prigozhin, was seen flying a helicopter and meeting troops. The mutiny marked the biggest challenge to President Vladimir Putin in more than 20 years of rule.
Putin is definitely much diminished. The Russian military, and this is of significance as far as Ukraine is concerned, is clearly in some disarray. And Prigozhin, well, apparently he's left the stage to go to Belarus. But is that the end of Prigozhin and the Wagner group?
The West says the armed rebellion shows real cracks in Putin's authority.
This whole episode has sowed really profound anxiety across Russia's elites. It's one more example after the launching of the invasion against Ukraine itself and the disastrous conduct of the war. One more example of Putin just being out of time and having consistently poor judgment and making mistakes. And the history of other times and places shows that an apparently very, very strong personalistic leader of the Putin type can, with great suddenness, lose authority and power if a critical mass of elites cease to have confidence in his ability to keep the ship of state going and to protect their interests.
But there is a different theory too, that actually Putin's image has got reinforced because the Russian people value the fact that Putin as the leader was able to resolve such a complicated situation without bloodshed. So what happens next? Do Wagner soldiers go back to invading Ukraine? For now, only those members of the Wagner group who get a contract with the Defense Ministry will be able to fight.
The fact that he's gone to Belarus is, I think, a matter of some concern. Now, what we don't know, but we'll discover in the next hours and days, as to whether how many of his fighters have actually gone with him. Because if he has gone to Belarus and has kept an effective fighting force around him, then he presents a threat again to the Ukrainian flank closest to Kyiv, which is where all this began on the 24th of February last year.
Whatever happens next, one thing is for sure, Russia has a big headache on its hands. Bureau Report, India Today.
Prigozhin used to be a chef. He was initially known as being Vladimir Putin's chef. From there, he went on to become one of the most feared warlords, one of the most feared militias and mercenaries in the world, fighting in places like Syria, in different civil wars in Africa, and then finally coming and helping the Russian army with its offensive in Ukraine, and also helping win battles which otherwise even the Russian army couldn't win. And what was quite remarkable was the manner in which locals seemed to be cheering Prigozhin and his mercenaries even when they were marching towards Moscow. So coming out, getting selfies, clicks, standing with them, clapping for them, cheering their advance. Now all of this makes Prigozhin a man who's much wanted, but he's been forgiven for his insurrection by the Russian president, thereby questioning the president's authority itself. You can start an insurrection against Putin and get away with it. This doesn't sound like the Putin we once knew.
From Putin's chef to cooking up a global storm with an armed mutiny. Yevgeny Prigozhin finds himself at the center of the attempted coup. Prigozhin is one of Russia's richest and most influential men, but he's had humble roots. He started his business initially as modest hot dog seller in St. Petersburg. He eventually opened a series of chic restaurants, including one on a floating boat called New Island, that became a favorite of another St. Petersburg native, Vladimir Putin. Lucrative state contracts followed, and with time, Prigozhin's activities expanded beyond the kitchen. For instance, in 2012, he won more than 10.5 billion rubles of contracts to provide food to Moscow's schools. However, despite the riches that the food industry brought him, in 2014, he diversified into a new sector, the private military. It is unclear whose idea was it from the Wagner group, whether Putin asked Prigozhin for help or the latter pitched it to him. Either way, the group came into existence during Russia's 2014 invasion of Crimea. Wagner's success in these early operations led to the group's swift expansion. Wagner became a proxy army for Putin. Subsequently, Wagner Group began to be involved in almost every conflict in the world where Russia had a role to play, from civil wars in Sudan and Libya in Africa to Venezuela during the presidential crisis of 2019. When Putin decided to invade Ukraine in 2022, Prigozhin and his Wagner Group were at the heart of Russian operations. The group benefited Russia significantly. It captured the key regions of Soledar and Bakhmut for Russia. White House officials estimate the private mercenary group employs around 50,000 soldiers. Of those, 40,000 are thought to be convicts who have been employed from prisons in Russia. What role will Prigozhin and his Wagner group play now is unclear. Will they mount an assault on Kyiv from Belarus, or will they regroup against Putin? Bureau Report, India Today.
This is the most significant challenge to the command over power of Russian President Vladimir Putin. For the moment, it seems that there is a hiatus, but no one who tracks geopolitics thinks that this is where the story ends. So the critical question then for all our viewers on Newstrack becomes, where does this battle go next? Two battles now. The battle for survival for Vladimir Putin, whose authority has been questioned like never before, and more importantly, the war being fought between the Russian and the Ukrainian army and the impact it's having on the rest of the world. To talk about all this and more, I'm joined by a very fine set of analysts. I want to welcome first Ajay Malhotra, former Indian ambassador to Moscow. Welcome, Mr. Malhotra. Nandan Unikrishnan has spent his lifetime studying India-Russia relations, understands the ins and outs of politics in Russia very closely. Air Marshal P.K. Barbora has been the former Indian defense attaché in Moscow and therefore understands the capabilities of the Russian army and this war in Ukraine. For a perspective from Moscow, I'm joined by Tatiana Khukreva, journalist. She's been with us in the past, looking at what's happening in Russia and can probably explain the current situation in Moscow and elsewhere. But I first want to go across to Solumia Boborovska, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, joining us on the Newstrack live from Kiev. So Solumia, welcome. We know that a Ukrainian counter-offensive has been underway for the last few weeks. It hadn't made much progress so far. From a Ukrainian perspective, as you and your country have been at the receiving end of this Russian offensive, what are you making of the current state of play where Vladimir Putin's authority has been questioned? He currently seems in control, but his command over power is definitely weaker than in the past. What does this mean from a Ukrainian perspective for you as a member of parliament in Ukraine?
So, first of all, we see all the situation as being very internal Russian situation. And it, even despite all Ukraine, the whole world was watching what's going on in Russia. But the point is that around 600,000 of Russian troops, soldiers, they are here in Ukraine, on Ukrainian soil and ground. That means we continue to fight and nothing has changed to Ukraine. Despite Prigozhin was busy with his attempt to show something to Putin, his guys were fighting on the front line in Ukraine as well. So he didn't take them back from the front line. They stayed in Ukraine. He just mobilized the guys who were near him. But you are quite right. We see Putin has started to show his weaker side. He didn't expect. He was betrayed. But still, we haven't seen Prigozhin for 2 days. We don't know we know for sure the price of the word Putin's word that he promised Prigozhin to be alive. We still don't see Prigozhin anywhere. But I don't believe personally, and we don't believe in parliament in Ukraine as well. Wagner can be disappeared, but still, Wagner as a group, military private group, but still it can be appeared, Prigozhin private group, whatever. That's one of the obligatory and obvious tracks always Russian officials had in their property as their instrument. We can see the African states, we can see the Latin American states where Wagner group are operating, and they will be back in Ukraine because they can use the resource that which Russian army cannot. But the question is not only for Ukraine, but for India, for Europe, for US as well. Where we are already, all our partners, allies, yes, except Ukraine, for the changing of Russia. Are we ready to see it defeated? Do we ready and are we ready to see Russia without Putin? What's next? What kind of Russia can be after Putin? I think these questions were lying and put on the table in different states, and probably in India as well. So that would be the main question: how to make this state again, not to provoke and not to invade and not to break the whole international rules.
Solomia Borovska, thank you very much for joining us from Kiev, Member of Parliament from Ukraine, giving a Ukrainian perspective on how this opens a window of opportunity for the Ukrainian forces to move faster and also weakens the control of Vladimir Putin. I want to go across to Moscow. Tatiana Khokreva joins us from there. Tatiana, that one question the whole world is asking, where is President Putin right now? And to what extent do you think his control over power, which so far was unquestioned and unquestionable, being weakened as a consequence of the actions of Yevgeny Prigozhin?
Well, look, first and foremost, I'd have to correct you a little bit. You call this a coup, an attempted coup, but nowhere in any of his addresses did Yevgeny Prigozhin say that he wanted to actually overthrow the government or the president. He never said that.
Sure.
So this whole rhetoric, being built on the fact that this is an actual coup against the power of the president is flawed and it's very base, which kind of gives us a lot of the answer that you're looking for. But in the meantime, the power of the president, being the person who actually solved this whole thing, he delegated the solution, he delegated the talks that were held, and he did solve this. I don't think his image has been harmed whatsoever.
So do you want to tell us, what do you think is at play? Sure, you're right that Prigozhin didn't officially say that he was attempting a coup against Putin, but he was marching towards Moscow. The army came within 200 miles of Moscow. That by itself is unsettling. For all practical purposes, it seemed like an insurrection, but you're right that he didn't mention the word coup. What do you think then is at play? From the lens of Moscow, from your eyes as a reporter on the ground in Russia, what do you think is happening? Why do you think this happened?
Well, look, first and foremost, you say army. There was a column of cars. I would not necessarily call this an army. As you very well know, our actual army is, nowhere near what the cars that were driving towards Moscow. From a point of view of a person who was in Moscow on Saturday, we were watching this, but you probably should have been in the city to understand the level at which it wasn't, it didn't look like an actual attempted coup. to anybody who was here. I mean, people were out in the streets, doing sports, going to restaurants, surely worried about the images, but not as much so as, it has been portrayed everywhere outside of Russia.
Okay, so do you think that Vladimir Putin's control over power in Russia is weakened at all, or do you think he's still as unassailable as he was last week?
Weakened in what sense?
Weakened in the sense that he first said that there would be action against Prigozhin and those from the Wagner group who led this insurrection. He promised the sternest action and then agreed to an amnesty of sorts, had the Wagner group go, because they questioned Putin's authority. Putin is seen as a very strongman leader. He doesn't take to insurrections and people questioning his authority, and isn't really known to be a forgiving man. So clearly he was under pressure, which is why he had to let Wagner group go towards Belarus. If this was the old Putin, he would have marched the Russian army, who didn't seem to fight Wagner, and taken them down. And by now, Prigozhin would have had to face the consequences of his actions, ma'am.
But also, this situation is not over yet.
Sure. Okay. So I hear what you're saying, and it's interesting because you're giving it a perspective from Moscow. I want to go across to Nandan Unnikrishnan, who's tracked India-Russia relations for decades, distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, has innumerable contacts in Russia. Outside of what we are hearing from Moscow, in all your conversations and all your understanding of the power dynamic in Russia, Nandan, what's your sense of whether Putin has been weakened, and most importantly, where could the situation with the Wagner group and Prigozhin go from here?
Thank you, Rahul, for inviting me. I don't think President Putin's power has been weakened in any sense. I think this thing about the Russian army not taking on Prigozhin yesterday, there are some facts that we have to put on the ground, I think, before we start talking. Prigozhin has about 25,000 troops. He marched about 800 kilometers yesterday. So I don't think there was anything more than a few trucks. There are no tanks that could do 800 kilometers in 12 hours. So a few trucks may have been heading towards Moscow. Yes, there were a couple of skirmishes on the way, and he did bring down a few helicopters, which were unarmed, incidentally, surveillance aircraft. But nevertheless, I don't think that the Russian army that there was no action against him because the Russians were either supportive of him or they were afraid of him. I think no action was taken against him because the president wanted to resolve this without bloodshed. And he was hoping that at some point of time, Mr. Prigozhin, who clearly it was not expected what he did, because he met Mr. Putin 9 or 10 days ago. And both the chaps said they had a very productive meeting. So clearly, this was an unexpected development. And I don't think Putin or anybody expected Mr. Prigozhin to suddenly go off the edge like this. So overall, I think, in fact, at this point of time, Mr. Putin may actually have won out because he's seen as somebody who's resolved, as your commentary said, resolved a complicated situation without bloodshed. I don't think his authority in any sense has been undermined, because if you look at the front and where the war was being fought in Ukraine yesterday launched a few ferocious attacks. They did not gain any ground. The Russians responded with massive artillery fire and missiles. So the war was going on as it has been for the last couple of weeks. So there has been no effect there. The Wagner group was withdrawn from Ukraine on the 25th or 24th of May after the Bakhmut battle. So they were not fighting there. So clearly their not being there has not made any difference. The third thing that I'd like to point out is that it is only Yevgeny Prigozhin who's gone to Belarus. So you had a British lord talking about armed entourage around him and the danger that he presents. I think the man is lucky to go alive. And I would suspect that he is alive because of the intervention of the Belarus president. As far as the other troops are concerned, their contribution to the victory, as from a Russian perspective, is acknowledged. They have been allowed to go home. Those who did not participate in the action of Prigozhin on Saturday, and there are many of those also, have been asked if they want to have separate contracts with the defense ministry. So to sum it all up, I don't think Putin is weakened.
Okay. So Air Marshal Babora, Nandan Krishnan says Putin isn't weakened, you're a military man. An insurrection against a sitting president. Those leading the insurrection are given amnesty. Nandan does understand Russia more than many, but maybe there are things happening in Russia which are different from the assumptions that you'd bring to bear when looking at Russia ordinarily. What's your sense as a military man?
Look, let's be very honest and clear. And firstly, let's bring politics into it. Now, we all know that the battle for Ukraine has not been successful as far as the Russians are concerned. Why? You want to make war? Come on, then use strategy. For goodness sake, Putin was controlling the war by removing his generals one by one. Is that a way of fighting a war? Just because that general couldn't perform up to Putin's? And is Putin a strategist as far as war is concerned, warfare is concerned? I really have my doubts. The way you start removing your people who are in control of certain areas, you will not succeed. And then, more importantly, I feel that power has got to Putin's head. And anytime power goes to anyone's head, it's trouble. It's trouble, and that is what is happening in Moscow. That power has gone to... He's been removing generals, left, right, center. I don't think you can fight a battle like that. Now, next coming is he has...
So what do you think will happen next, Air Marshal Babora, given the fact that this insurrection for the time being has been controlled? We're seeing Prigozhin head towards Belarus. Putin is currently not in the public eye, but he's there somewhere. Do you think this then brings the focus back on this Russian counteroffensive, the Ukrainian counteroffensive and the Russian pushback? Or do you think this has weakened Putin in a way that was unimaginable till 10 days ago?
Yes, I think your second opinion is correct.
First and foremost, again, we're talking about a counteroffensive, and even the Americans have already said that this counteroffensive is completely ineffective, that Ukraine has failed to gain any sort of ground during the events that happened on Saturday, which is clear indication of the fact that, A, the army is progressing. The Russian army is progressing. It doesn't matter if Wagner is fighting on the ground, is not fighting on the ground. We're actually gaining ground. We're gaining ground around Bakhmut, where, you know, as rightfully has been said, Wagner has not been fighting there for quite some time. So, you know, you're talking about an insurrection.
Okay, let Air Marshal Babora respond to the same question. You're right that the counter-offensive so far hasn't really made progress the way the Ukrainians would have liked. But my question at Air Marshal Babora is whether this now, A, motivates the Ukrainians to fight harder, which is tough because they were already highly motivated, weakens the Russian army in a way that wouldn't have happened earlier. Their morale has been quite average because it's not as if they've been making rapid gains on the battlefield either. Air Marshal Babora, has this weakened President Putin or not? The voice from Moscow says no. Can I get Air Marshal Babora to respond to that? Yes, sir.
Yeah. You can't win a war in penny pockets. No, sorry. Your strategy has to be something that you have to cut off a whole chunk of land to be able to plan further strategies. Putin is not a strategist. Please understand. He is not a strategist. And if you're not a strategist, you can't make war. not of the type that he has made, which unfortunately for him hasn't gone off well at all. As far as his own status is concerned, whatever little I know from my friends there is that he doesn't trust anyone. Putin doesn't trust anyone anymore. It's totally, I will do it. And this is where I personally feel he is in trouble. What kind of trouble, only time will tell, but he will be in great trouble because he will be fighting his own people.
Okay, Ajay Malhotra, you've been India's former ambassador to Moscow. Your sense of the power dynamics more from a political perspective, it seems the Russian defense minister could possibly be on the way out. That was one of Wagner's demands. There hasn't been any official confirmation so far, but that's one of the things that has been spoken about. From your understanding of the state of play in Moscow, is Putin's power indeed weakened or not?
Well, if you see, Putin has all along been handling the entire Ukraine crisis with kid gloves. He's not gone along and had this sort of devastatingly aggressive attacks. You started off with a small operation and proceeding with, as I said, with kid gloves. He may have initially looked weak in the present context, but he has quickly prevailed and sorted out the internal challenge. He's done so without major bloodshed and with the regular units and generals and the governors of the various districts on the way, and the Russian opposition parties, none of them announced for Prigozhin. So it is a little, I think, off target to say that somehow a gentleman with 4,000 troops at his command at that particular moment may have had an insurrection which could have succeeded. Certainly, it could have opened up the way and triggered off a dangerous internal conflict, because there are others who would like to stir and muddy the waters, given that Russia is in a war situation at the moment. But where will we progress from here? And you ask about Shoigu. You know, if you see Putin's dismissals, and here I don't agree with the previous speaker, he has been very careful in keeping on those who have been loyal to him. And Shoigu, if he removes him, he will sideline him gracefully. He has shown 3 decades loyalty. They are friends of long standing. He used to be in charge of the Emercom earlier. He's from Tuva. They are very, very close buddies. And he rarely abandons them. He will get another sinecure. If you see, there's nobody really in a power position whom Putin on sidelining has abandoned. You can see even the people in power. Foreign Minister Lavrov has been there for donkey's years. NSA Patrushin has also been there for a very long time. Even Medvedev, when he had to switch from away from being president, has been given a sinecure, and I think the same will happen up here. There are certainly rumors, and that could be a part of the package that was agreed, by which Prigozhin agreed to go to Belarus. But let me up here point out, if he had not gone, unfortunately, there would have been blood in the streets, maybe in Rostov, perhaps approaching Moscow. I don't think it would have reached Moscow. You have in the governor in Tula a very effective old aide of President Putin, Alexei Dumin. He's been the governor for a long time. He used to be the security in charge and aide to Vladimir Putin before, and was in charge of military special operation forces, which annexed Crimea in 2014. And if you see from the visuals, you had some of the Chechen forces arriving there, Ramzan Kadyrov's men, and occupying the bridge. And this was all shown through visuals. So a few trucks moving up and down, I didn't think would have amounted to much. And with nobody coming out in his favor, I think.
No, but what did you make of the reactions of the people on the way who were cheering the Wagner forces, coming out wanting to get selfies? It almost as if it seemed for that while they were marching towards Moscow that people wanted Wagner to win and for Putin to lose, or at least those who were seen in all these videos and photos.
It depends which videos you're seeing. There's a lot of disinformation and misinformation being spread by both sides. And
But also-
certainly the West, certainly by the Russians to project their viewpoint. But no, nothing of the kind. Did any of them join them? They pose for photos and for, it was more for photo ops, etc. Even in Rostov, if you see. So that is a bit of an exaggeration to say people said, well done. That well done might be for the previous very competent performance of the Wagner forces. And if you look at the situation on the Ukraine front, the Ukrainians couldn't take any advantage of the 2 days that they had to try and hit it. In fact, the Russian forces continued to defend, and the counteroffensive has got nowhere so far. That could change, but at the moment, I think the Russians, in their defensive posture, are very much in command. So with Putin back in position, much depends on what else happens now. And certainly there are Western intelligence and other groupings involved in trying to take advantage of the situation. And it is a war situation. Russia against NATO, I agree with assessments that are put out there. It's not merely Russia against Ukraine. That war finished a long time ago. So let's see where that develops. But to say that he has been grossly weakened and all that.
Nandan Krishnan, what do you think will happen next? Given the state of play at this moment, it's an uneasy truce of sorts. Will Wagner actually now sit out? Will Prigozhin actually now sit out the rest of the battle? Or do you think this truce is only temporary and there's bound to be another fissure and we can't be certain where, when, how, but there's likely to be another eruption somewhere? You're on mute, Nandan. Unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry. First, let me address.
Just unmute yourself, please.
Yeah, I've unmuted myself.
Hello?
Firstly, let me address the question of the cheering of Wagner troops by the citizens. The cheering is taking place after Wagner surrendered. These are all photo ops taking place after they have surrendered and pulled back. When they were going towards Moscow, you will not be able to find any of these pictures. So just a clarification. As far as Wagner is concerned, I think it's a legal question. If Prigozhin owned Wagner as a private entity, it will be disbanded. There is no other option that is there. But there is another question that is linked to Wagner. Wagner is involved in several countries outside Ukraine. It is involved in Syria, in Libya, in some African countries. Someone mentioned Sudan and Venezuela. They are definitely not involved there. But there are other countries they're involved in. The question is, how will the Russian state now deal with a few thousand armed Russians in these countries? Because these countries have employed Wagner to perform certain tasks. So somebody has to decide what is their legal status and how. So I have a suspicion that either a new private military outfit will be floated, or an older one which already exists will absorb these people and the operations will continue. Wagner as a force under Prigozhin is over. It probably won't be participating in the Ukraine war any further, except those who get their contracts renewed by the defense ministry. Those members of Wagner will be fighting in the war in Ukraine. Will there be another insurrection? I doubt it. This is the problem with this one, Rahul. We cannot call it an insurrection or a coup. As the Russian journalist pointed out, nowhere has Prigozhin said that he is anti-Putin. In fact, on the contrary, he has said during Saturday that he is willing to lay his life down for Putin. So, it doesn't make sense what happened. You can't have an insurrection where you're saying that the chief of the state is the one you're willing to lay your life for. So, there are a lot of unanswered questions. And if you will give me a minute, I basically think that Mr. Prigozhin went over the edge because his company was under threat. And his business was becoming quite difficult. And he was trying to attract the attention of the Russian state, of President Putin. They had a meeting 9-10 days ago. Unfortunately, his queries were not addressed in a matter that he would have liked to see, despite the fact that both sides, they had productive meetings. And so he just went over the edge. I mean, I don't want to use stronger words, because the actions that Prigozhin indulged in on Saturday are not rational. They don't make any sense.
Okay, he's also a mercenary fighting a crazy war. Many of his people around him are dying. He's not happy with the kind of support he's getting from the Russian Defense Ministry. It is, make no mistake, a very volatile situation. Those who understand Russia deeply think that the matter is settled for the time being. But strange things have happened in world politics. And whether or not this matter stays settled is something we will track. But you've heard from the experts from Moscow, from India, who seem to think that for the moment, Putin is in charge. I want to thank all our guests for joining us. This story had the whole world on edge because it has consequences not just for Moscow and Kiev, it has consequences for the rest of the world, which is why it is important to feature this on the Newstrack. I'm slipping into a quick break, thanking my guests. Coming up on the other side, the Modi government hits back at former US President Barack Obama for his comments on minorities and their status in India. Details coming up on the other side of these messages. Stay with us, we're back in a moment.
Colleges of the country. Which one will boost your aspirations? From courses to placements, know them all. India Today Best Colleges Survey 2023. Issue out this Friday, 23rd June. Subscribe now to indiatoday.in/subscribe.
So, Sakshi, there are a couple of things that are working very well for MRF. If you think it's a 50% return from 1 year ago, in this century alone, suppose we take 2000 as the starting point, I'm sure you must have been in third or fourth standard then. From then on till now, the stock has been a 100-bagger, which means that MRF in 2000 was quoting at 1,000 rupees. And in 2023, it's at above a lakh. So it's gone up 100 times in a span of 23 years. And primarily the reason behind that is a very low liquidity in the stock, which basically means that one, the price ticket is very high. So retail investors generally don't come in. And institutional investors are, from what we've heard on the street, very clear in the mind. Of course, the management also takes a lot of feedback from the market. And they're very clear. Don't split the share. Don't reduce the face value. Stick to what it is. Ensure that there is little liquidity as possible, so that because of the lack of liquidity, the stock keeps on, have that additional momentum to go higher and higher, higher and higher. So in 2012, it was at 10,000. 2014, it was at 25,000. 2016, 15,000, 50,000. 2018, 75,000. And 2023, we are at 1 lakh. Let's see what happens in 2030.
Right, absolutely. But, are you actually now looking at a 2 lakh rupee target at all? Is that still feasible to think, or is it still a very, very far off thing that one can imagine?
So, Sakshi, 2 points really. I don't think so. This is a point to enter the stock. Let's be very, very clear. The market is very, very overheated. And end of the day, MRF has an excellent brand, but it's a little on the higher side as far as valuations are concerned. But for those who have the stock, absolutely do not exit. And those who wish to buy, even at these 6 digits, I would just say wait and let it correct a bit. If it does, you're lucky. If it doesn't, then well, you were never a part of the rally and you never are. So what can be done? But I don't think so. This is the time to jump onto the bandwagon. It's extremely overheated. If you look at the momentum, the price is above short, medium, and long-term moving averages. We've seen increasing volume, but it's very, very risky unless you're a very smart trader to come into the stock.
Why does this happen? Let me tell you the science behind it.
For more informative videos like this, keep watching India Today News Mode.
Welcome back. You're on board the Newstrack. Focusing now on Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman pushing back hard against American President Barack Obama, who targeted the Modi government and asked his former colleague President Joe Biden to do much more on the question of the protection of minority rights in India. That's a question the Prime Minister had sought to answer during his visit to the United States, where he says his effort is to ensure that all government benefits are given to every single community, regardless of which religion the citizen may belong to. Questions asked by Nirmala Sitharaman about Barack Obama's own records when it came to Muslims and Islamic countries, given the fact that while he was president, the United States bombed many Muslim countries.
India may fall apart if rights of religious minorities not upheld. Protection of Muslim minority in a majority Hindu India worth mentioning.
These comments by former US President Barack Obama has sparked a massive debate and an all-out counter from the Modi government. The comment, which was timed to PM Modi's historic visit to the United States, has led to backlash for the former US President. Leading the charge against Obama have been PM Modi's top ministers.
राष्ट्रपति जी ने कुछ बातें बोल रहे हैं जहां शायद 6 देशों के खिलाफ, जहां मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन डोमिनेंट है, बॉम्बिंग हुई उन्हीं के कालों में। सीरिया से लेकर के, यमन के लेकर के, सऊदी के लेकर के, इराक के लेकर के बॉम्बिंग नहीं हुआ।
ओबामा साहब को मैं समझता हूं कि यह बात नहीं भूलनी चाहिए कि दुनिया का अकेला देश ये भारत है। यहाँ के रहने वाले ऋषियों और मनीषियों ने भारत की सीमा में ही रहने वाले लोगों को अपने परिवार का सदस्य नहीं माना, बल्कि सारी विश्व की धरा पर रहने वाले लोगों को अपने परिवार का सदस्य मानते हुए वसुधैव कुटुंबकम का संदेश दिया। कुछ एक परसेप्शन सारी दुनिया में बनाने की कुछ ताकतों ने कोशिश की है, उसी आधार पर शायद लोगों की धारणा बनी होगी।
Minister Nirmala Sitharaman referred to Obama's track record as president when the US dropped a whopping 26,000 plus bombs on Muslim nations like Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and others. And this was in 2016 alone. But the criticism isn't just coming from Indian soil. The former Commissioner of United States Commission on International Religious Freedom has this to say on Obama's comments.
I think the former president should spend his energy complimenting India more than criticizing India. I think it was the time to celebrate a historic visit, rather than leveling some criticism on it.
Remember, Prime Minister Modi himself shut down the democracy is dead narrative a day after Obama's comments. The Prime Minister sent a crystal clear message to critics that democracy is in our DNA.
भारत और अमेरिका दोनों के डीएनए में लोकतंत्र है। लोकतंत्र हमारा स्पिरिट है। लोकतंत्र हमारी रगों में है। लोकतंत्र को हम जीते हैं।
Even as the government is doing everything it can to refute Obama's claims, the opposition has latched on to the former president's comments and criticized the BJP's defense.
अरे जिन राष्ट्रों की आप बात कर रही हैं वहां मुस्लिम्स माइनॉरिटी में नहीं, मेजॉरिटी में, और वहां अगर अमेरिका ने अपने हित में या देश के हित में किया है तो माइनॉरिटी पे नहीं, उस देश पर, उस देश के सैनिकों पर हमला किया होगा।
Away from the politics, it's clear Obama's comments have been drowned by the success of the Prime Minister's visit to America, as the Biden regime has also made it clear that they have full faith in the Indian democracy story. Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where we wrap up the Newstrack tonight. For your time and your trust, thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. We just got back from Washington, D.C. I was initially thinking about whether it will be even practical to come and do the show tonight, but given the fact that between the time we took back and got back, Prime Minister Modi had already been to Cairo on a full state visit and was back at work, I thought, okay, we must follow his lead and do exactly the same. So here we are, back straight from the airport, live on the Newstrack, and I look forward to seeing you at 8 p.m. tomorrow evening. Goodbye, good night, stay well.
So how does one log off? Limit yourself to one screen at a time. Spring clean your social media accounts. Use apps to bolster self-control. Don't charge your phone near your bed. Set time boundaries in usage. Use your gadgets thoughtfully. Think about whether you actually need to use your laptop or whether you need to use your phone. Is there any work really, or just using it mindlessly? Do you really need to watch TV, or you'd rather go for a walk or even take a nap, which is actually more relaxing, more refreshing?
If you ask an average person, they'll say, oh, I'm on social media for about 10-15 minutes or maybe a little bit more in there. I'm not typically there. But if they start actually analyzing their time, and there are apps and features available on these gadgets, they then come to realize that I was putting so many hours more.
Prioritizing offline relationships and getting a glimpse of what real life offers brings real joy. Try it.
Swaying palm trees by the sea, a free lifestyle, a popular tourist destination. That's Goa. The golden mound of Radha Krishna temple with its saffron flag flying high is a refreshing change in this setting. Situated at the Bits Pilani Goa campus in Zuari Nagar, Sankol in South Goa, it's the latest tourist attraction of the region. The foundation stone for the Radha Krishna temple was laid in 2021 and the temple was inaugurated in 2023 by Jagat Guru Shankaracharya Swami Shri Avimukteshwaranand Saraswati in the presence of Chief Minister Pramod Sawant and members of the Birla family.
Devotees can now come to Goa and also pray and feel that Goa too has a lot of Indianness, and this temple in fact talks about what Indian culture is all about.
अनंतो कोटि ब्रह्मांड नायक भगवान की परम पावनी कृपा से गोवा जैसे प्रदेश में ऐसा दिव्य मंदिर बनना, ये भगवान की अत्यंत करुणामयी पवित्रमयी कृपा है और इसी कृपा से ऐसा दिव्य महल भगवान का बन सकता है.
The architectural splendor of the Radha Krishna temple stands out with its Nagara-style construction, showcasing the distinct North Indian temple design. Crafted primarily from the white Makrana marble sourced from Rajasthan's Kishangarh region, the temple complex boasts of 5 elegant shikharas. The intricate artistry, meticulously carved over 2 years, incorporates a harmonious blend of floral motifs, mosaics, and sacred symbols. Spanning a vast expanse of 3.6 acres, this temple gives a strong, welcoming vibe with an aura of goodness and peace from the entry point itself. The grand entrance adorned with peacocks and lotuses adds to the temple's allure, while the engraved lotuses on the ceiling captivates visitors. The front gate of the temple is called Singhadwar or the Lion Gate. To reach the temple, devotees ascend 5 flights of stairs, each representing a stage in one's life's journey.
It was 84 years ago that the first Birla temple in our country was opened. It was opened because the Birla family felt that the Mughals and the Britishers, when they were ruling India, they destroyed the temples. And now the 4th generation, K.M. Birla, has embarked on the similar journey. Almost 1,100 artisans were making sure that this temple is built over a course of 22 months. What you see inside the temple is beautiful white marble that has been sourced from the state of Rajasthan. Rajasthan is the birthplace of the Birla family.
With Aishwarya Paliwal, Bureau Report, India Today.
Breathe, breathe, breathe.
A stronger core, a toned figure, classical yoga. Add some anti-gravity into the mix. And you have this fun, elegant and rather exciting aerial yoga practice going for you. Celebrities all over are obsessed with this Instagrammable yoga. They've been hanging upside down like owls of the aerial silks suspended from the ceiling. The acrobatic aspect makes it a lot of fun and rather very clickable. Shilpa Shetty, Alia Bhatt, Jackie Fernandez, Kareena Kapoor Khan, Ananya Pandey, Malaika Arora and so many more have shown us how they look after their bodies and tone those abs for a beautifully strong core that makes age look like just another number. Aerial yoga is a hybrid one. Developed by Michelle Dortignac in 2006, it involves dancing, Pilates, yoga poses and tons of acrobatic moves.
You have to add on to other ways of format as well if you want to see yourself into a progress to aerial. So either you do your body weight workouts, either you do yoga, either you do ashtanga, anything that has to be, alternate.
If you get bored going to the gym every day or running or walking does not cut it for you, give this a shot. This anti-gravity yoga as a lifestyle change. It will help you maintain great fitness, help with flexibility and balance. Just remember to check with your doctor first. Yes, doctor, because it is so dynamic that there are some who should not do it. Pregnant women, people with migraines, or anyone who is not allowed to hang upside down for medical reasons, people with blood pressure issues. Your doctor can decide if you are suited for it or not. With that clearance, get set and go.
Heart patients, people with cataract eyes, eye operations, people with high fluctuating BPs, definitely they cannot perform aerial yoga. Rest, everybody, depending on their strength, depending on the progression towards flexibility, can perform aerial yoga.
We get it if normal yoga is boring for you, and hence look at how the aerial one works.
Keep breathing, do not hold your breath.
One session can cost you approximately 800 rupees depending on where you go. You require a minimum of 2 to 3 sessions a week for 3 months to learn this properly. And while it looks far more exciting than regular yoga, it has benefits aplenty. It enhances flexibility, boosts your mental health. It can boost spiritual well-being. It could help strengthen your core, help tone the body, help you achieve overall fitness goals. this practice is picturesque and looks too tough for beginners. But with the right instructor, it is super simple for most who are into fitness already, with an additional benefit of leaving you feeling super zen. In New Delhi with Nitika Gandhi, Lifestyle Bureau, India Today.
Sorry.
नए दौर में दोस्ताना हमारा अब देखेगा जलवा ज़माना हमारा। ये डीलों के दिन, कुछ हिसाबों के दिन, कई दिल जलों को जवाबों के दिन, डिफेंस फील्ड में अच्छे ख्वाबों के दिन है। वेलकम अमेरिका में जी मेहरबान, मेरे जैसा फ्रेंड भी मिलेगा कहाँ, मिलेगा कहाँ। ऑटोग्राफ को दिल